Thursday night, we're back between the lines, and tonight we're bringing the old Chad back into the game tonight to talk about Israeli-Palestine, the conflict, the wars, what's happening in the West Bank, what's happening in the Gaza, who surrounds Israel, and that's it. And we're going to replay during the show. You got that clip loaded tonight, Chandler? We're going to replay the clip of Chuck Fleischman in the Capitol being assaulted by pro-Palestinian forces and his tremendous biblical response to that challenge. But you got to understand the history. The Palestinian problems are real, and there are real problems all over in the history. And well, in Jesus' time, was there a Palestine? I mean, when you look back, there was a Jerusalem. Obviously, it was a Jewish area. It was controlled by a Jewish area. And in those times, and over the history, through the Middle Ages, obviously although we fought holy wars over part of that country, didn't we? I mean, the Catholic Church fought with the Muslims for years over control of Jerusalem because it was such a sacred religious site.
Absolutely. It's been going on for a long time. And first, I want to say thanks for having me. It's great to be back on BBB.
On the spotlight.
It's been about a couple of years, and we did. It's so odd seeing you right here because I did hundreds of shows with you out there directing it. So it's good to be back, though. And the set looks phenomenal.
It is better, isn't it? And our good friend John Rafe sponsoring our show tonight. We're happy about that. And we send our appreciation out to all public officials. Okay, let's look at it. Israel sits. I want to ask you a question. When Jesus went out fishing, and they went out in the villages, totally unrelated, did they go in the Mediterranean Sea? Where did they fish?
Yeah, I think
they got two seas, Baltic and Mediterranean.
Judea and Samaria. It's been called a million different things since then, ruled by different people.
But that bordered what body of water? When you say Peter was a fisherman,
it was the Dead Sea. You had the Dead Sea.
Okay.
You had, but the conflict that we see so much on the news now, really, it goes back to the early 1900s.
Let's start there. Let's start there. Right there. That's a good place to start.
And I think the best way to start out is actually with one of the biggest misconceptions about this conflict. I think a lot of people, if you're just kind of following this on the news, casually watching it on, reading about it, they think that it's a religious conflict between two different sets of religions, Judaism and Islam, that's been going on for thousands of years, that's never going to be solved. I think that's really nothing could be further from the truth. This conflict is actually about nationalism, and it's really about land. It's an old-fashioned land dispute. The idea that this has been going on for 1,000 years is false because Islam's only been around since 600. So, I mean, you've got 1,500 years there approximately. So this is not a situation with two religions being at odds with each other.
Okay.
It's much more about two people with rights to seemingly, both having rights to this piece of land and their own nationalistic aspirations. So,
all right, well, let me intervene there. Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
I agree to that at some point. I do. The nationalism stuff. But there were no land disputes in Germany. There were no land disputes in other areas. We can go back to the 40s, and there were in Jerusalem, there were Arab-influenced people that were cooperating with Hitler on the extermination of Jews. So I think anti-Semitic viewpoints, and I take full responsibility as a Christian, as a Catholic, that basically all of us have had some role in that anti-Semitism at some point in our histories. But I don't think that's a land dispute that creates that fervor, that feed. I think it has something. I will say this, though, and this is to support your point. Judaism is a monotheistic religion, and so is Islam. The Bible with the tower.
Absolutely.
And all that's separate. They get separated in the Old Testament somewhere. But Judaism has more in common. A Jewish person can go into a mosque can go into a Jewish, but they can never go into a Christian church because the Godhead is divided. The Godhead is not divided in those two religions. So it supports your point that it's not all religion, but some of it is just a dispute over. I've never got anti-Semitism. I don't understand why it exists.
Well, I think anti-Semitism does plays a huge part in this story. So going back to without the Holocaust, you're not going to be having this type of well,
that's what settled
dispute.
the land dispute in 1948. Correct. The whole world stood shocked and apologetic, and And really, and that's another question, wasn't there a great migration? I mean,
Yeah,
remember
so-
the Paul Newman movie, The
Absolutely.
Exodus and all that? When they went to establish a Jewish state, a permanent Jewish state in Israel, did they not bring in immigrants to make that population significant enough?
You're absolutely correct.
There wasn't
and
that
so,
big a population.
getting back to perfect segue into the early 1900s,
Okay.
what you have going on, this is pre-World War I, is all these nationalistic outbreaks all over the world, where you have, obviously World War I is fought over nationalism, but you have it breaking out in all types, all types of outbreaks. While this is going on, there is a Jewish nationalism that's known as Zionism. This has sort of become a hotbed term now, a controversial term of Zionism. All Zionism means is support for a Jewish homeland.
Okay.
So in the early 1900s, a guy named Theodor Herzl, he's the founder of Zionism, he decides that...
Was he a rabbi?
No, he was secular, because Jewish, Judaism is defined by not only a religion but ethnicity.
And was he a European or what?
Yes.
Okay.
So he has this idea that Jews need their own state. This is sort of precursor to the creation of State of Israel.
Teens, I remember
exactly.
that.
So and it's this group of people, they call it the diaspora. It's the displaced Jews all over Europe. Well, Herzl originally says, we just need to assimilate into Europe. That's what we need to do. He quickly realizes this is a bad idea. Now, because obviously we see what happens in the 1930s and 40s to the Jews in Europe. So he quickly abandons this and says, we need our own state. So in the early 1900s, you can blame this whole land dispute, all this, on the British, because what is now Israel then was a British-controlled territory called Palestine, and this is in World War I.
How big was the World War I Palestine?
So it's roughly the same size, a bit bigger, but we're more or less talking around the same size of land, give or take, throughout this dispute.
The West Bank,
Gaza,
Strip,
Jerusalem,
and Israel.
correct.
And Israel. So
Yes.
the whole area.
The whole area. So Britain needs support in World War I, so they start promising this, and they realize, the old saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire. They control India at this time. They're all over the world. Yeah. They're the biggest superpower in the world, Britain, at this time. They start realizing they need support, so they say, they start thinking some of these smaller places are more trouble than they're worth to govern. So they start cutting deals with other countries to, hey, when this war is over, if you'll help us now, you can have this place.
Right.
So they promised Palestine. This is the whole root of the conflict.
Was there a country named Palestine?
Yes, that's what it was called. It was Palestine. So
self-governed under British rule?
It was under British rule, just like India, just like what Gandhi, rebelled against. So they start promising this land. If you'll help us in World War I, you can have it. They promise it to the French. They promise to the king of Saudi Arabia, or what was Saudi Arabia, and they promise it to the Jews of Europe. Hey, if
so
you
they're
support
promising
us,
both sides.
promising it to everybody. They have this document called the Balfour Declaration.
I know, I read it today.
You want to look it up. It's really the seeds of this whole conflict.
1918.
Exactly. 1917, 1918.
Yeah.
They signed this document. This is the first Western support of a superpower for a Jewish state. They put in writing, you all deserve your own state. We'll support it. After the war, we'll give it to you. Well, after the war, obviously Israel's not created until 1948.
Sure.
So to your point, you start seeing that great migration after 1918. From 1918 to 1948, Western European Jews from all over the world are migrating there. Now, there are people there, Palestinians, that, the overwhelming population.
Let me ask you a question. I have to interrupt you. I'm too old. If I don't ask, I'm not.
No,
okay. So we got. Is there two types of Jewish people in Israel over the last century, or do we have? I don't know how to say it. Palestinian type Jewish people who are native to the land that have that, and then we have European, Caucasian type, and I know there's a great African Jewish population too.
Oh, yeah.
So all these people start to migrate to the Promised Land. Is there more migration from 44, 45 to 48 because of the end of the war and the treatment of Europe and the survival of the camps? Do you see a lot of people just taking off for there?
Absolutely, and that's a great question as far as the makeup of Palestine at that time. What you have there is there was a great book, and it's written by a Christian musician in Palestine at that time in the 1930s. This is a secular society. That's going back to my first point of this is not really religious conflict. This gentleman in the 1930s said, he was a Christian musician. He said, I would go over and celebrate Passover with my Jewish neighbors. I would go over and celebrate the Islamic holidays with my Muslim neighbors. everyone more or less got along peacefully.
That's what all the movies always suggested was. It was pretty much of a
secular
everybody
society.
got along,
yeah. Now, the city of Jerusalem was much more equally divided among the groups. On the outskirts of Palestine, it's much more, Palestinians. But you do start to see more and more migration. You start to see that seeds of conflict happening. There'll be uprisings of Palestinians. The British...
Even in the 30s.
Yeah, and the British,
They were complaining about immigration during that time. And the Palestinians were upset that the balance was going away.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the Jewish settlers there would, help the British put that down. This is going on in the 1930s, 1940s. Obviously.
How would they help put it down? Guns?
Well, yeah, just, quelling the mob.
Okay.
Well, and then, obviously, in 1933, Hitler takes power. We know what happens there, the largest human tragedy in history.
Does he have the reach to have influence in that area?
Yeah, there was a guy named the Great Mufti of Jerusalem.
I read about him today.
Exactly.
He cooperated with him.
He sure did.
He was Islamic.
Sure did. Yeah, he was the main preacher basically in Jerusalem that was absolutely pro-Hitler.
Extermination of the Jewish people.
Sure, absolutely. Was not as.
Were there more in 1933? Were there more Jewish people or more Arabs in that area?
Oh, by far more Arabs.
Yeah, I think so.
More Palestinians. The city of Jerusalem was a little bit more divided. But what happens though was obviously continuing the conversation is the Holocaust at that point. Everyone saw the need of what Herzl was talking about in 1917. These people have to have a homeland.
What do they? I mean, do you not think? Well, maybe it's cultural, but do you think that? Speaking to your point, do you think that the Jewish population in America has immigrated well enough to? Is it a counterpoint to what could happen? Certainly in the Soviet Union, they just told everybody we're going to have a secular society.
Yes. No, I think that. The need after the Holocaust, where the UN does recognize a Jewish homeland.
And created. United League of Nations before that, they tried
Correct.
in the 30s and 20s.
Yes, they do really. But the big year is 1948. They say when Jews are wandering all over Europe, this is not good.
Displaced.
Yeah, when they're displaced, this is not good. Yeah. We saw what happened to them. They deserve their own state. So the UN creates what we call today, you hear this term, a two-state solution.
Okay.
It's 1948. They draw a map, and it looks like two puzzle pieces. Right. This side for the Palestinians, this side for the Jews. This happens in 1948. Immediately, and you're going to see this throughout history, the Arab neighbors declare war on Israel. 1948, immediately. The minute that they
didn't want the two-state.
They didn't want the two-state. They didn't want them there at all. So a war is immediately, declared. This war goes on for 9 months.
Now, who's declaring war?
So the Palestinian people, the areas of
Are they self-governed?
Well, at that time, they were also fighting for their independence as far as Britain. They didn't like this arrangement as far as the two people. Their Arab neighbors also.
And what did the Saudi Arabians and the Egyptians would be big?
You're absolutely right, and they're going to help, and they're going to continue to declare war for the next 30 years.
So all of the Arab neighbors were against Israel.
Correct.
Okay.
Now this war is known as Israel's War of Independence. It lasts 9 months. Mm-hmm. For the Palestinians, they call this the nightmare in their history. This is the beginning of what they see as the oppression. What you see in the
war they started.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, you're going to see this time and time again where Israel is attacked. They're always attacked. They never, they're never the first one starting it. But once they're attacked and they win the war, they take a little bit more of that puzzle piece every time, a little bit more.
Yeah,
land.
the war in '67, they got quite a bit.
Exactly.
That's the next fight, right?
You're exactly right. So 1948, they prevail. They win the War of Independence. They take a little bit more of that land. They continue to, you see the migration continue to happen. 1967, to your point, the Yom Kippur.
So you and Sabre weren't around, but I was already active at that time, so I can remember it pretty well. And then 6 years later, my senior year in high school, War of '73. Which was the biggest conflict?
Well, the war of the Yom Kippur of '67 was, it looked like they were, going to face total annihilation. All their neighbors, this tiny little state, Egypt, Jordan, Syria. I mean,
so what happened?
Well, it lasted 6 days. Israel won. They had a superior military force. They fought smarter. They win, but when they win, to the continuing narrative, they take a little bit more land. They take the Golan Heights. They take the Sinai in Egypt. So they continue to, that little strip of land continues to get bigger and bigger. But again, they're attacked first.
Yep.
Now you go to 1973, they're attacked again. Now that was most impactful to. Well, we got to get to Egypt. So Egypt also plays in 1973. They attack there. But now you probably remember you were talking about being around in '73. That impacted. Oh no! It impacted America with the gasoline crisis.
That's correct.
Yeah, where you could not get gas.
The first time, well, it was the first time that we saw 27-cent gas, and I bought gas at 27 cents my sophomore year in high school, but it went to $1 immediately.
Yeah,
$1.50.
Which, gosh, that would be like, I don't even know what the inflation.
Well, it was $1.50 when Trump left office. I mean, so
yeah.
I mean, it's not, but it's just, and then it went up to $3 or $4 later on in '78, '9. But go ahead. So in '73, we had that conflict. We were dependent on them in oil. Okay.
Yes.
And to stay on subject, so what happened in '73? How long was that war? 6 days?
So that war was, a couple months. It was obviously the 6 Day Wars in '67.
And ironically, the Palestinians had kidnapped those Israeli athletes the summer before
Munich '72
and blew up the helicopter.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, what you got to really get to the next pivotal moment, and I know you remember this. This was huge, and I'm going to brag a little bit on Jimmy Carter, which is not a sentence.
Jimmy was smart.
Not a sentence you hear spoken very often.
Met him at the Holiday Inn in Oak Ridge when he was running.
That's right.
Student, yeah.
So in 1978, Jimmy Carter, by far his best achievement, and I think really an underappreciated thing,
peace agreement.
Gets Anwar Sadat of Egypt and Menachem Begum of Israel in a room. It seemed impossible that these people would make peace. They make peace.
We've never had a war since, really?
Never had a war ever.
With Egypt.
But with Egypt, between
and
them.
Egypt's the power broker in that area.
They were at that time.
Saudis now.
Correct. And Israel gives Egypt the Sinai back. They have a lasting peace. This moment is critical because at this point it stops being so much an Arab-Israeli conflict and more just a Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Because you've seen a lot of moderate Arab nations make peace with Israel since then. The UAE, Jordan. A couple last month when Iran launched the attacks. Obviously,
we become
you had Saudi Arabia helping.
We'll talk about
down.
the economy in a second, but it becomes such. If you're, United Arab Emirates or you're Saudis or somebody, you can't let the Israeli conflict ruin your economy. You got to keep moving.
Absolutely.
Those guys dominate worldwide, just kind of like China. The idea that China could take us out in a war and do other things, we're their best customer.
Oh, well, that's a whole other. You made that point a couple of weeks ago on the show. They hold like almost $1 trillion of U.S. debt. China does. Yeah. You're going to blow up your own store. We're sneaking up on them.
See, we're doing it. Yeah, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Chandler, take us to commercial. We'll be right back. Talk with Chad some more about Palestine and Israel.
From Oak Ridge, Tennessee, IB3 Global Solutions conducts operations around the world to enhance the U.S. national security posture and minimize radiological and nuclear threats. IB3 Global Solutions. Mission first.
Fan Gear Barn is Oak Ridge's source for new and vintage sports fan gear from around the world of sports. Find your favorite team gear at Fan Gear Barn, located at 977 Oak Ridge Turnpike, across from the hospital. Open 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., 6 days a week. Closed on Sundays.
At Navarro, we partner with our clients to advance clean energy and deliver effective solutions for complex challenges in the nuclear and environmental fields.
Prescription drug misuse is a prevalent and potentially fatal problem. When people do not properly monitor, store, and dispose their medications, it can create an opportunity for misuse. Count it. Make it a goal to count your pills once every 2 weeks. Like it. Secure your medications at home. Drop it. Drop off unused or expired medications for proper disposal at any police department in Anderson County. For more info, visit asapofanderson.org. Brought to you by ASAP of Anderson. Prevention works.
We should never lose sight of our health. To keep moving forward, let's not forget everything we've learned. Limit the salty food options. Make your own daily exercise routine. And always receive regular checkups. More than anything, we have learned how important these small steps can make a big difference, so we can all continue to move forward together.
All right, crew, let's get started. Sure.
Don't ignore the law. You must call 811 at least 2 to 3 days before any digging project so you can avoid hitting our essential buried utilities. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811.
We're talking about it's gotten to be a real issue, and we're talking about the Israeli Gaza Strip with Hamas, Palestinian area, and we're doing background right now. We're getting ready to move into who is Hamas and where they come from. But basically, we're setting the stage a little bit with Chad on what the area looked like and what it was. And we were talking a little bit before the break that it was an Arab Israeli, and I'm 60, I'm in my late 60s. An Israeli war is always, when I was young in high school and college, it was an Israeli-Arab conflict. But at some point in the 70s, it ceased to be that in the 80s, and it became a Palestinian. And the next thing we see, right, is Arafat with a gun over his head at the United Nations. So go with it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The early 1980s, again with the peace agreement, the Camp David agreement with Carter. This does shift to be a much more of a modern conflict we see with Israel and Palestine. Israel is always having to be in self-defense mode. I heard you make that comment the other day. They're always having to say, as my good friend Saber says, do what you're big enough to do. They've always got that line of defense up. In the 1980s, you mentioned Arafat, a very familiar historical figure for a lot of people. He represented what you said, the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was a more or less nonviolent, legitimate government. The United States, did deal with them. They did have talks with them, certainly compared to what Hamas is.
Let's define nonviolent for the PLO for a second. There wasn't as much explosiveness. There were planes and there were terrorist acts and there were things along the way, but not. Once they lost the support of Egypt, and you saw where, if I'm not mistaken, he was assassinated a few years later.
Excellent point. So Anwar Sadat, for his troubles of going through that, the bravery and courage he did, he was assassinated by an Egyptian, I think in 1981, 3 years later. You're going to see that on the Israeli side in the 90s.
He was on the stage.
Exactly. The gunman comes in.
26 or 7 years old.
That's a really a profile of courage there, to have the courage to make peace with Israel. That's the type of leaders we're missing today. But not to get off point, in the 1980s, obviously, the PLO takes the stage. You see more Palestinians being displaced into places like Lebanon. Obviously, again, nonviolent.
I've always seen Lebanon as a moderate reaction. Has it been moderate? But of course, they have supported. I guess Syria stepped up as the more. All these people border Israel.
Absolutely. It's a rough neighborhood, and Lebanon. Their main problem there is Hezbollah, which is a Shia group that Israel fights with from time to time. But
that's in the
1980s, the problem with the PLO was, from the viewpoint of many Palestinians, their whole leadership really rested on a state of permanent conflict. These guys had the opportunities to make peace, but they were scared what's going to happen after. Our whole, if you're, Alan, you're a political mastermind. I mean, if your whole message is drumming up support against something, you got to govern at some point. And I think they were afraid of what happens next. Our whole platform is resistance.
We're seeing a little of that in Washington.
Yeah, there you go. Sure. I won't.
They're better fighting against some cause or something than they are governing. Go ahead.
When it gets to governing. Yeah. So in the late 1980s, you see this group called Hamas begin to emerge. One biggest misconception about Hamas is they took power because they were really good at providing social services for people.
That's correct.
That's just like the IRA in Ireland. These alternative groups, violent though they may be, were really good at giving out medicine, schools, water. The PLO leadership was seen as, corrupt.
But let's flip Ireland for a second. I'm an Irish. The IRA thing, the British oppressed the rights of the Irish. In my opinion, that doesn't justify Lord Bottom or any of that stuff. Violence is never the answer. But the Irish really were. I mean, I have friends, and we have friends that have come over here who are part of Ulster groups and peace and trying to train. But they'll tell you they can't get jobs in Northern Ireland.
Absolutely.
And not just from the British side of harassment, but their own side doesn't want them working with the British, et cetera. So police, fire, and stuff like that. So I guess my point is that that's pretty much at least defined on religious terms. It could be Roman Catholic and Protestant. It could be territorial, but in the end, because they shared a common religion and because they did, I think that got that viewpoint. We as a country understand that Irish stuff better, I think.
Oh, I think so.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to give the Palestinians the step up that the Irish get, but I don't know why. I have no justification for that.
Well, I think that what you see specifically to your point, is the replacement of leadership with Hamas. You know, Hamas comes in, they provide these social services, but they are much more radical. Let's just not mince words here. They're a terrorist organization. They're a violent organization. They're not a legitimate governing body, even though they were elected in a fair election in 2006. We'll get there, but they're not. You know, they're not a legitimate.
But where were they
reasonable.
elected to?
So in Gaza in 2006. But
so Gaza has an electoral process.
In 2006, they immediately.
How big is Gaza?
It's a very small place. You know, it's
bigger or smaller than the West Bank?
Gaza is smaller than the West Bank. Yeah,
really?
West Bank is going to be the West Bank is currently governed by the PLO,
right,
and Ramallah, the West Bank. Gaza is governed by Hamas, but Hamas takes they set off the first suicide bomber in 1993 in Israel. This is what we've unfortunately come used to seeing in the scenes of Israel, sending suicide bombers onto buses, cafes. This is the type of guerrilla warfare they start fighting in Israel in 93.
Do you have any idea what the population of Gaza is?
I don't offhand. It's a incredibly. I know it's an incredibly densely populated area, which makes any type of combat.
See if you can find out what that is.
They're on top of each other. I know that it's an incredibly crowded.
What's the population of Israel?
So Israel is got around I think 8 million people, something like that. It's a small country. I could be off on that.
You see the impact of World War II in the concentration camps. There were 7 million Jewish people in New York State
there you go.
Before the war.
Yeah. So in the 1990s, they tried the peace process again. Just a bit more background on this, because we talked about Sadat being assassinated. They signed the Oslo Accords in the early 90s. This is a tentative peace agreement with Arafat and Israel. A very brave Israeli prime minister tries to go forward with this. In 1995, his name was Yitzhak Rabin. He's assassinated for his trouble again, trying to make peace by a far-right Israeli extremist. Both sides do have extremists that do not want peace on this. That is, but and finally, in 1999, Bill Clinton made this a huge priority. You remember, he had Arafat and Ehud Barak at Camp David. He really, and that's what we're really missing today, as far as an American president has got to be involved in this to set the table and give time, foreign policy assets to this to get it done. The only two that have really made this a huge priority have been Carter and Clinton. In 1999, Arafat later said that he was stunned at how much Israel was going to give him for this. He couldn't believe how much they were willing to concede in the negotiation. Arafat, he later said, I couldn't believe how much they were willing to give up. He walks away at the last minute. Looks like there's going to be a two-state solution peace deal, again, because I think his whole platform was on resistance. He had no plan for the day after. He says, we'll never get a deal this good again. He walks away.
My friends that are in the know will say the same thing about when we went into Iraq. We didn't have a plan to get out. We had a plan to get in. We had a plan to do things, but we didn't have the language I would use it.
Yeah.
We didn't have a reverse plan. We didn't have an out plan. We didn't have a plan to what happens if we get stalled and stuff like that. They never planned it out right. So
Sabre just said 2.3 million people in Gaza.
2.3 million in Gaza. Check the West Bank too.
Tiny.
So Israel's bigger than those two to put together.
It is, but you get to the modern conflict. There's these violent uprisings called the Intifadas. Viewers have probably heard of those. These Palestinian uprisings. These are constant issues, but the really violent ones were in the early 1990 and then in the early 2000. The second one was a lot more violent. At that point, Israel invades Gaza. Mm-hmm. They pull out in 2006. When they pull out, the UN comes in. They do a free and fair election. Have vote, poll observers, everything, and people of Gaza immediately elect Hamas. So at that point, we're at 2007. Hamas is running Gaza. Israel has to take care of itself. And
so they're in an area about the size of Tennessee, a little small.
Yeah, and every time that Israel pulls back, they're greeted with rockets. These constants. If you've seen the scenes in Israel, just you'll be sitting there eating dinner with your family. The rockets sirens go off. This is a way of. Can you imagine that for Americans if we had to?
It's like the British in World War II. I know what you're saying. The German bombs and the bombing stuff. Okay, let's take a look at this a little bit different. Let's line this up. So I've got Gaza's on the west. The West Bank is on the west, obviously, of Israel, right? Jerusalem's up north in the middle. Is that correct? Okay. Jerusalem's in the middle. But Jerusalem's a little bit connected to the West Bank because Jesus went from Jerusalem to the West Bank in like 45 miles.
And Jerusalem is a holy site for Islam, for Judaism, and for Christianity. Okay. You know, that's why when Iran fired all the missiles over, you saw the Saudis help defend that, because it's a holy site for for Muslims too.
Who shot the missiles? Oh, Gaza people.
Yeah, no, in Israel, or in Iran, last month when they fired them over.
Now they're not connected directly to that area, but who are the sympathizers? Where does Hamas get their funding? Where does Hamas get? Are they getting Russian funding? Are they getting Chinese funding? Are they getting Saudi? The Saudis seem to sit it out.
Well,
for the most part.
Saudis,
although Osama bin Laden was
to your point. So Hamas, their leadership lives in Qatar, in these Doha, Qatar, that little tiny area there near Kuwait. They're very, very wealthy. I mean, they're living in 5-star hotels. These people are getting millions and millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars sent to them, predominantly from Iran. The biggest sponsor of terror by far.
Biggest country over there?
Yeah, I mean, as far as sponsoring this type of behavior, Iran, by far, anyone will tell you. The Saudis are interesting. They have actually done a lot to modernize their country recently. And we were actually, Jared Kushner worked on this issue a lot.
Yeah.
Trump put him on that. And we were really, America was very close to brokering a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And obviously the events of October 7th have complicated that tremendously, but we were really close. This leader of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, he's got with all his faults, he is trying to modernize his country a lot. A positive thing. You see positive things on women's rights, positive things on the country opening up.
You go to, before we go to break again, you go to the United Arab Emirates and just wealthy off the charts.
Oh, yeah.
We see all these fights and UFC and hotels and vacations and very westernized area.
Absolutely.
What is their story? Where are they located in the geography of it, and why are they so powerful? Oil, obviously. But
oil. And again, you've got the situation of leaders, just like I was talking about Mohammed bin Salman, who want a better future for their people, who are seeing the long view, who are not playing politics with this issue, trying to inflame their population. It's a different mindset. And again, I think the key thing about all this whole discussion now is just pragmatic leaders, strong leaders who are willing to take a chance.
We'll take a break, and then I'm going to come back and talk about Israel a little bit. We've defined the Palestinian efforts and where they're at and what they're doing, and we're going to say that it might be a secular war, and it might be, but for the rest of the world, it's not a secular war. And Christianity is forever linked to Judaism. We'll talk a little bit about how that relates to funding, support, and other things. All right, take us out, Chandler.
We should never lose sight of our health. To keep moving forward, let's not forget everything we've learned. Limit the salty food options. Make your own daily exercise routine. And always receive regular checkups. More than anything, we have learned how important these small steps can make a big difference. So we can all continue to move forward together.
Crew, let's get started. All right.
Don't ignore the law. You must call 811 at least 2 to 3 days before any digging project so you can avoid hitting our essential buried utilities. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811.
From Oak Ridge, Tennessee, IB3 Global Solutions conducts operations around the world to enhance the U.S. national security posture and minimize radiological and nuclear threats. IB3 Global Solutions. Mission first.
This is my husband, Alex Hussey. Alex is about 2 weeks away from coming home.
I was point man in foot patrol, and I stopped on the bomb. Lost my legs and left hand in an explosion.
And he suffered a severe traumatic brain injury.
As America's veterans face challenges, DAV is there.
There are so many mountains to climb, and we do it together.
With the right support, more veterans can reach victories, great and small.
To watch Alex take on this mountain, that's what this is all about.
DAV provides a lifetime of support to veterans of every generation, helping more than 1 million veterans each year.
Alex has conquered this mountain. That's something he won't forget.
With the right support, there are no limits.
Look at that smile! You did it!
But there's more to be done and more victories to be won.
This has meant so much.
Thank you, DAV.
Alex Hussey, thank you for your service. Support more victories for veterans. Go to DAV.org.
At Navarro, we partner with our clients to advance clean energy and deliver effective solutions for complex challenges in the nuclear and environmental fields.
Fan Gear Barn is Oak Ridge's source for new and vintage sports fan gear from around the world of sports. Find your favorite team gear at Fan Gear Barn, located at 977 Oak Ridge Turnpike, across from the hospital. Open 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., 6 days a week. Closed on Sundays.
We're going to get it on there. Okay, so Chad says he's talked out on the history and everything. He doesn't have much more, so I'm going to get in a little biblical to you now, folks. I think I found a lot. And the United States government has been the best ally and the number one supporter. We agree with that?
Absolutely.
And they funded and they've done stuff, and we have a connection to to Israel unlike anybody else. Now, I shouldn't say us. I should say all of the Christian world. But the United States is
it's called a special bond. You know,
it's a special bond. We've done stuff. We've tried. I guess a lot of countries in the world. It goes on and on. But let's say this. Let's talk about the West Bank. Our Christian heritage. Bethlehem, Nazareth, all that's in the West Bank,
yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And Jerusalem sits on that side of Israel because I think Bethany was like 8 miles by horse. Sure. So we're all right there, and it's all in our Christian heritage. And for us to let go of that kind of land is not in our nature. So we're going to fight to protect Israel at all costs, and we've funded them, and we've done a lot. I think that Israel is part of our sacred heritage. We have a special bond with them. If you didn't see, Chuck Fleischman he came out of the session, our congressman came out of the main meeting hall, what would you call it, wherever they vote, the big center there. So he's coming out of there, and immediately Palestinian media starts following him through the halls and harassing him about why are you this, why are you that. And to be fair, Chuck's probably the most recognized pro-Israel guy in the Congress. He's from New York City originally. He grew up there in a multicultural basis. Obviously lives in Chattanooga in our district. But he's very much aware of those issues and the things that different part of our culture struggle with. So anyway, Chuck was accosted. Chandler, how long to load that video? All right, give me 5 seconds. We're going to show you a video of Congressman Fleischman dealing with Palestinian media in Washington about 2 months ago. Let it rip.
You can tell the Palestinians I will never support them.
Why do you support the genocide and all of the war crimes and collective punishment? Are you concerned about all the children?
Let me make it clear. Let me make it clear. Israel is our ally, will always be our ally.
Even if they commit war crimes?
And they are not guilty of genocide, and I will support Israel forever.
Israel will stay your ally even though they commit genocide. That's your term.
Can you explain?
Even when they kill 30,000 kids.
That is a statistic. Israeli people on October. Let me tell you a statistic. Israel will exist. The Jewish state will exist.
That's not a statistic.
That's not what we're.
And that is for God
to
do
nothing to do with what we're saying.
And I will always support Israel.
Genocide, sir.
I will always support Israel. And you can tell the Palestinians I will never support them.
I am a Palestinian myself.
And I will tell you I will never support you. I will tell you to your face.
And you want my
goodbye
to
to Palestine. Goodbye to Israel. Goodbye to Palestine. We will support Israel forever.
So you are comfortable.
So just FYI, this guy just said goodbye
always
to Palestine.
Support Israel.
So you just said goodbye to Palestine. So you are saying you are comfortable with the murder of thousands of children.
The Jewish people will never suffer again under Palestinian terrorism, under Hamas, under Hezbollah.
Israel
will be secure forever. God bless Israel forever.
Thank you for
wipe Palestine off the earth. Yeah.
God bless Israel forever.
I got more calls from ministers in the Southeast Tennessee, Middle Tennessee. I believe Congressman Fleischman had calls from 1,300 rabbis nationwide. And very seldom have even our Jewish congressmen stood up with that kind of passion for Israel. And I think, obviously Chuck and I are good friends, but I think I think what it says is that there's a special bond between the United States, between our leaders in support of Israel, and there's just something very uncomfortable about the threat to Israel's existence and the threat to the Jewish people's existence. And you know, I think you're right in the 30s. I think we saw a need early to create a state. It's interesting, though, and we talk about the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union broke up, they kept everybody together in a common mark. And the minute they broke up, all of the nationalism from the early 1900s just came right back up. People started killing. We look at Bosnia, we look at Serbia, we look everywhere, and it just all started all over again.
Yeah. And to your point about the United States support of Israel, you're absolutely right. For, evangelical Christians, it is a special place in our religion. But also, taking the secular look at it, Israel is a democracy. It's a vibrant democracy in a very, tough part of the world. It is a place that with very Western values, where people can go there and live their life however they see fit. If you go into some of these other areas, you have a different type of lifestyle. You're going to be killed for it. I'm saying this is a very pro-Western society, and it's a vibrant democracy. I think that's one of the reasons, regardless of your religious views, that you should support a place like this.
And Israel doesn't sit on any oil, do they?
No.
That's ironic.
No, they have not. There's no oil there.
They sit on the faith of God. I mean, that's you go back to the Ten Commandments, you go back on the history, and God said he would always protect Israel, and I believe that, and we're doing our part. If you believe that Jesus was the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecy and he is the Messiah, it just ties you closer to Israel. And even Jesus said that. I mean, I think we're very close in that sense. And I support Israel. I'm with Congressman Fleischman. But I think there's military and state things here, too. The Israelis, not only, as we all know, have one of the best secret services in the world.
The Mossad.
The Mossad is probably unchallenged in that sense. I think you could put some numbers in there for the Soviets and some others. They
have to be. There's a saying in Israel after the Holocaust, simply put, they say never again.
Yes.
And that's when you do see the Mossad, right after World War II, goes and targets these ex-Nazis living all over the world, a lot of them in South America, of all places. Sure. They go and they find them. Yeah, they bring them to justice. Never again. And that's to my point of their people were almost exterminated. They have to take every threat very, very seriously and deal with it. And that's, you see all this, getting to October 7th. Yeah. The events there, massive intelligence failure, a rare one on the Israeli part. This massive atrocity happened. And now they're going to deal with the problem. They're not going to stop until it's done. Anyone could have seen that coming. I heard a great quote the other day. You don't send in the fire department to put out 80% of the fire. They're not going to stop until this is taken care of.
That's a great line.
So I don't know.
And Hamas is using the Palestinian people to hide.
Absolutely. That's their MO. And I think all of Americans' hearts break for any innocent killed on either side of this. It's horrible and it's a tragedy. And there's no doubt there's people suffering. But I don't know what people expected when they see.
As unjust as it is, it's still a part of war.
It's a part of it. It'll be going on till the beginning of time till the end of time. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm a realist, and that's.
There was some genocide when they came into Israel that night too. Those 2 days, they just butchered babies and hurt women. She saw the 2 women that were released. The bodies were released from Hamas, and I just think it's. I was talking about this. There has been planned a genocide of the Jewish people for centuries. I mean,
and on that point, I think it's ridiculous. We saw this week the International Criminal Court talk about issuing arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli Defense Minister. That's a joke, obviously, but it came out yesterday that Germany said they would, as a signatory to that court, they would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he came into their territory. So that's great optics for the Germans.
Yeah, that's nice. That's real good. The Germans
that they've not done enough to the Jewish people. I think that's.
They need to sit it out. I know we're a couple generations removed, but they need to sit that one out.
Yeah, that's bad optics. And this whole thing, the original country that did the investigation into this, presented to the UN in December, was South Africa. Again, they're blaming this. You can't make it up. We're blaming Israel for genocide after deplorable, history of apartheid. So, again, countries need to look themselves in the mirror before they start casting stones on this issue, I think. But, I mean, that's my opinion. But it's...
If you don't see the significance of Israel, something's wrong with you. And I don't care what religion you are. You have to understand that the Christian world is about, it's about 28-30% of the world, and we have a special tie to Israel and other things, and just we're not going to give that up. I'm going to take a short break. Chad's going to get after me if I don't let him talk about the Ukraine and Russia. He's well read. I don't know anybody who's well read. He's studied it. He knows it, and he has a little different perspective on things. And I'll take the counterpoint, and we'll go with it for the last 10 or 12 minutes. One more roll there.
From Oak Ridge, Tennessee, IB3 Global Solutions conducts operations around the world to enhance the U.S. national security posture and minimize radiological and nuclear threats. IB3 Global Solutions. Mission first.
Fan Gear Barn is Oak Ridge's source for new and vintage sports fan gear from around the world of sports. Find your favorite team gear at Fan Gear Barn, located at 977 Oak Ridge Turnpike, across from the hospital. Open 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., 6 days a week. Closed on Sundays.
At Navarro, we partner with our clients to advance clean energy and deliver effective solutions for complex challenges in the nuclear and environmental fields.
Prescription drug misuse is a prevalent and potentially fatal problem. When people do not properly monitor, store, and dispose their medications, it can create an opportunity for misuse. Count it. Make it a goal to count your pills once every 2 weeks. Lock it. Secure your medications at home. Drop it. Drop off unused or expired medications for proper disposal at any police department in Anderson County. For more info, visit asapofanderson.org. Brought to you by ASAP of Anderson. Prevention works.
We should never lose sight of our health. To keep moving forward, let's not forget everything we've learned. Limit the salty food options. Make your own daily exercise routine. And always receive regular checkups. More than anything, we have learned how important these small steps can make a big difference, so we can all continue to move forward together.
All right, crew, let's get started. All right.
Don't ignore the law. You must call 811 at least 2 to 3 days before any digging project so you can avoid hitting our essential buried utilities. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811.
Okay, we're back with the last segment now. We're talking international politics. We're talking about Israel. We're talking about one last point on Israel before we start on Ukraine is that Israel is a key military ally for us. I mean, they're very strong. I started in that with their intelligence agency. But if we didn't have the Israelis, we wouldn't have any presence in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, they're a great ally militarily, intelligence sharing, one of the most sophisticated intelligence agencies.
Do we have any bases in Israel?
Oh, I'm sure we use their airspace, types of. Israel has nuclear weapons, as well. They don't.
Well, they invented them.
Albert
Einstein.
So they're very advanced in that sense. Very key spot for strategic.
But now we're at a point where Iran's pretty much getting there. Israel's there. Egypt's has them, don't they?
No.
Nobody else.
Israel and Pakistan, India.
Yeah.
India, Pakistan, Israel.
India had it early in the 60s.
India's got it, and then Pakistan got it in the 90s. That's a very.
But no Middle Eastern countries besides Israel.
Not that I know. Israel, Pakistan, India are the only people in that part of the world.
Let's talk real quickly about. We have about how many minutes left? 10. 10 and a half, honey. So here we go. So the question is, set it up. Military maneuverings were going on in that area of the world. Putin didn't like it.
Switching to Russia, Ukraine.
Absolutely. And we're coming out. Putin invades Ukraine as what you would call a response to NATO's expansion.
Yeah, I want to make this very clear. You know, you talk about this issue. This is a highly debated issue in the United States because obviously the amount of money that we just sent over there, that we've continued to support Ukraine. Nobody, if you take any type of different view, people say, well, you're pro-Putin or that. That's absurd. I don't know anyone that thinks Vladimir Putin is a good person. But I think that if you look at what happened there, and I've tried to look into it over the years, in 1991, you were talking about, this is why I want to talk about it, you were talking about the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Yes.
Ukraine held a referendum in 1991 to either stay with the Soviet Union or to become their own country.
Right.
92% of Ukrainians voted to have their own country.
Sure.
So that's a good starting point. There's no question that is a sovereign country in Ukraine. Okay. And I think that the people there have every right to resist, to fight. It's not their fault. But I think what has been stunning to me as just an observer of this since February 22nd, when the invasion happened 2 years ago, is just the amount of misinformation out there as far as why this is happening. Let me just give you briefly what I think is the Western narrative. The Western narrative is Putin's a madman. He's going to invade all his neighbors. He's not going to stop at Ukraine. You got to stop him in Ukraine. I hear U.S. senators saying this all the time. You got to stop him in Ukraine because if he doesn't do that, then the Baltics are next. Then he'll be in Germany. It's this absurd narrative when really, if you look at it, at the breakup of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, there were 16 NATO countries, signatories. Okay? Most of those were in Western Europe, England, France, United States. There were not a lot of Eastern European countries. Those were members of what was called the Warsaw Pact. We tell the Russian leadership, everyone was horrified of what would happen with the breakup of the Soviet Union because all those nuclear weapons, we didn't know what were going to happen to them. Sure. You're an energy expert. So that the breakup happens there, and we, shortly thereafter that, we're worried about those nuclear weapons. We tell the Russians we're not going to move a NATO expansion 1 inch to the east. We're not coming. There's no need, right, at the breakup of the Soviet Union. That's what we tell them. I believe that's either James Baker, the Secretary of State, or it was the NATO Secretary General, tells them we're not coming 1 inch to the east. Well, what do? As a current day, there are 32 NATO signatories. Just last year, we admitted Sweden and Finland.
Right.
Poland's in there now. This is a massive expansion, and what I would just submit very quickly is, you remember, reading history, the events of October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Sure.
We didn't like it one bit when there was missiles in Cuba.
That was a little isolated.
The world almost ended in 13 days, and during that conflict.
That's another show.
It's a whole other show.
Great show.
Oh, but I'm saying, it's we didn't like it. I understand why we didn't like it. I think that if you're from Russia's perspective, you see this map going from 16 to 32 countries. Next door, we're putting missile defense systems in Poland, all these places. I don't think we would like it either. I think that explains a little bit of what's happening here. You had Kamala Harris,
I can buy into that,
and all of her infinite wisdom a couple of weeks before the invasion, saying Ukraine's going to be a member of NATO. Just like we were talking about the Israelis, where they're saying never again.
She said that before the invasion.
Yes. Oh, yeah. And last week, Anthony Blinken, in his infinite wisdom, said Ukraine will be a member of NATO one day. That is all I'm saying is that is a red line for Vladimir Putin. Just like the Israelis are saying never again. He is not going to let that happen. All I would submit, and all I wanted to say was, I'm for peace. I'm not for the end of the world over who controls the Donbass. I don't want my children to die over that. I think that's...
Donald Trump gets elected, okay? Donald Trump's already suggested, I believe, I did not read this, it was told, let's get to the peace table.
Sure.
So we get to the peace table, we sit everybody down. Do we negotiate from the expansion of NATO, or do we negotiate from, let's just cut it right here? Most of that part of Ukraine is already Russian sympathizers, Russian-oriented people that border right up to Russia. Give them a slice of that, or do we negotiate with NATO and say we're going to stop this here, and you just retreat, and we'll give you that obligation? What's on the bargaining table?
So 2 quick points. Donald Trump said it best. Give him a lot of credit here. They tried to bait him. I think it was last year where somebody said, "Oh, are you for Putin or for Zelensky?" And he said, "I'm for the side that stops the killing. Let's stop the killing."
Very
I thought that was a great quote, and I'm for that. Let's stop that senseless violence. As far as the negotiating thing, everyone knows what this looks like, what a peace plan actually looks like, and it's just a matter of how many people are going to die in the meantime. Yeah. Very similar parallels to Vietnam.
I was just going to say the North Korea,
yes. What it looks like is, okay, you give Russia Crimea. They've already annexed it. There's historical ties there that goes back thousands of years. Putin annexed it in 2014. You give them that. The areas that they're occupying right now in eastern Ukraine, have the UN come in, let the people there vote. Let them be a free and fair election. If they vote to stay with Russia, let Russia have it. If they tell Russia to leave, they leave. And then Ukraine stays neutral. It does not become a NATO thing. That would end it tomorrow. Everyone knows it. And it's just a shame to think of how many more people are going to die, how many more mothers are going to lose children, wives, spouses, everything over what we probably know is going to be a negotiated settlement anyway.
My friends in the intelligence business, or CEOs that used to be in the intelligence business, tell me the Ukraine war is a pawn, is important because of the Russians and the Chinese, and if we don't fight for Ukraine and stand up to Putin, we're going to lose ground worldwide. That makes it a little bigger picture than you're painting.
I think that is something that someone working for the military-industrial complex would say. And I think that that was something called the domino theory in the 1960s with Vietnam. That did not work out didn't work out very well for us. We got to stand with Vietnam, or they'll take over all of Asia. That was preposterous.
I think now it's more resources than just marching in with an army. I think it's more, can Chinese get more control there? I think there are some people that I deeply respect that think we are third at best in a nuclear conflict, that we don't have the players, we're not putting the money in it properly, and they're concerned. I think, my 2 cents, I don't disagree with your reaction with Putin. Putin's a lot of things. Stupid's not one of them.
Correct.
But my thing with Vladimir Putin is I just think that he will, in the end, he's a KGB guy. He's been around 50 years. He misses the old Russia. I'm just surmising. This is my read on it. I don't know what his goals are, and I think that's the centerpiece to the whole thing. Does he want to negotiate a peace and go out? Does he want to bring back Mother Russia? I have no idea, and I think that's the key to the whole thing. Where's he at? And is he still in power in a year or two?
Well, that's a whole other show in and of itself.
And Americans have some sympathy because he opened up the churches. It's kind of fun. We had bumper stickers running around. In Russia, they're praying in schools. In America, you can't mention God. And I think once Putin got in, his grandmother had a major, you've read it,
yes.
grandmother made a major influence on him. So he opened up and said, we're going to church. They can do whatever they want to do. And I think Americans like that. I think that made him charmed us a little bit there with that, and I think we like that. But I don't know. I know there's always more to the story than we see. What do you think of Zelensky? Give me a minute on Zelensky.
Obviously he displayed incredible bravery. After that initial invasion. I think we'll always remember that line where he said something along the lines of, "You want to ride? I don't want to ride. I want bullets," whatever it was. There's no question he was very brave after that initial invasion in February of 22.
Good campaigner.
Charismatic guy. I understand why he's, you're invaded. I understand why he's doing what he's doing. But the idea of NATO getting directly involved in this is insane, and anyone talking about it. You have the president of France talking about sending NATO troops into Russia, to Ukraine. Do they have any idea what that means? Yeah. I'm just for peace. I think that this is a dangerous, dangerous time where we're really walking a tightrope, and there's a lot of people. Lindsey Graham, not a war he doesn't like. There's a lot of scary talk out there right now, and I think we need to sit down at the table and try to figure this out. There's just too much at stake.
I hear everything you're saying. I'm thinking to myself, it's not the world I grew up in, where everything was peace tables and people getting together in Egypt and Israel and Russia. And you're right, Carter and other Nixon, great peace broker, and
absolutely,
and everybody. And it's just not the same world anymore. We settle differences, but we're a much more tribalistic kind of culture now.
And there's a lot of money being made off of it.
That's the
thing.
That's another thing on private schools too.
Sure. So
you've been outstanding. Hasn't you been outstanding, Save? Okay.
Well, I'm just glad to be here. This is
you and Save are talking about a podcast.
We are. I hope we get it done here. I hope we have a set this nice.
Yeah. Well, you will have.
You
a
had
set
me on a little fold-out table.
On that. She'll just take my set. She don't care. She'll do what she needs to do.
We're out of here.
Good night.
Thank you.